Welcome, enthusiasts. Today we are stepping back to a pivotal moment in automotive history. In early 1942, the hum of assembly lines producing sleek civilian sedans came to a grinding halt. The United States had just entered World War II, and the industrial might of the nation was desperately needed elsewhere. Imagine a world where you couldn't simply walk into a dealership and buy the latest model. This wasn't just a pause, it was a total transformation of the American landscape. For the next nearly 4 years, the arsenal of democracy would prioritize tanks over coupes and bombers over convertibles. This transition redefined vehicle engineering and created some of the rarest classic cars in existence today.
The official order came from the War Production Board. On February 9, 1942, the last civilian car for the duration of the war rolled off the assembly line. Every major manufacturer, Ford, GM, Chrysler, and the independents like Packard and Studebaker received the same directive: stop building for the public. The numbers were staggering. In 1941, the U.S. produced nearly 3.7 million cars. By mid-1942, that number plummeted to zero. This mandate was essential to conserve critical materials like rubber, steel, and chrome. If you owned a car, you were now a steward of a precious resource that had to last indefinitely.
Before the total shutdown, a unique breed of vehicle was produced in early 1942, known as blackout cars. Because chrome was a strategic material needed for the war effort, the government banned its use on non-essential parts. Manufacturers were forced to paint over what would have been shiny trim, bumpers, and grills. These cars looked radically different: muted, utilitarian, and somewhat haunting. Today, an original 1942 blackout model is a holy grail for collectors. They represent the literal fading of civilian luxury as the shadows of war lengthened. If you find one with its original painted trim, you are looking at a piece of frozen history.
Retooling a factory is a massive undertaking that usually takes years, but Detroit did it in months. The Willow Run plant, operated by Ford, became a marvel of the world, producing a B-24 Liberator bomber every hour. Chrysler began churning out M3 and M4 Sherman tanks. For the vehicle owner today, this era explains why so many mid-century car brands have such deep ties to aerospace and heavy machinery. The engineering lessons learned in building high-performance aircraft engines, like the Allison V1710 or the Packard-built Merlin, would eventually find their way back into the high-compression V8s of the 1950s.
While civilian cars were gone, a new icon was born. The military needed a light reconnaissance vehicle that could handle any terrain. This led to the development of the Jeep. Bantam, Willys Overland, and Ford collaborated and competed to create what General George C. Marshall called America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. Over 640,000 Jeeps were produced during the war. For enthusiasts, the Willys MB and Ford GPW are the ultimate survivors. They proved that a vehicle could be simple, rugged, and indispensable. This rugged DNA would eventually birth the entire SUV category we know today.
For the average car owner in 1942, keeping a vehicle on the road was a battle of its own. Gasoline was rationed, not because of a shortage of oil, but to save tires. Rubber was incredibly scarce after the fall of Southeast Asia. Speed limits were dropped to 35 miles per hour nationwide, the victory speed, to reduce tire wear. Car owners had to become amateur mechanics. If a part broke, you didn't buy a new one, you fixed it or scavenged it. This era birthed the use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without mentality that defined a generation of vehicle maintenance.
Since no new cars were being built, the used car market exploded in value. Proper maintenance wasn't just a hobby, it was a necessity for getting to work. This period saw a rise in technical manuals and how-to guides for the common man. Owners learned about the importance of frequent oil changes, chassis lubrication, and cooling system care to prevent engine failure. For today's classic car owner, many of the best-preserved pre-war cars are those that were meticulously maintained during the war years by owners who knew they couldn't replace them.
The war acted as a technological pressure cooker. Advancements in fuel chemistry, metallurgy, and engine design were accelerated by decades. The need for high-altitude performance led to better turbochargers and superchargers. When the war ended, engineers brought this knowledge back to the automotive world. Cadillac and Oldsmobile, for instance, introduced high-compression overhead valve V8 engines in 1949 that were direct descendants of wartime research. The 1942 halt was the dark before the dawn of the greatest era of American automotive power and innovation.
Victory in 1945 meant the assembly lines could finally return to their original purpose. In July 1945, Henry Ford II drove the first post-war civilian car, a white Ford Super Deluxe, off the line. However, the 1946 models were essentially 1942 designs with minor trim changes. The public didn't care. They were desperate for new wheels. Demand was so high that used cars often sold for more than their original sticker price. It took until 1948 and 1949 for truly new post-war designs to hit the streets. But the 1942-1945 gap remains the most significant void in automotive production history.
For the modern enthusiast, the 1942 model year represents a unique challenge and a badge of honor. Because production was cut short in February, the total numbers are tiny compared to 1941. If you own a 1942 vehicle, you own a piece of a year that changed the world. These cars remind us of a time when the entire industry pivoted to save a nation. Whether it's a blackout special or a late production sedan, they are symbols of American resilience. As we maintain these machines today, we aren't just preserving steel and rubber, we are preserving the story of the arsenal of democracy.